Hello, everyone. Good evening. I grew up without a cell phone. Who here grew up without a cell phone? Still growing up. I remember a time when prank calling using clips from Friends episodes on my answering machine was the cool thing to do. Like if a boy had a crush on me, he'd stick a recorder next to the television, then he'd put that recorder onto the phone, and then he'd call me, and then my answering machine would pick it up because the character's name was Monica, and she was a really big nerd, and I was a really big nerd, so it was a very obvious choice. Do you remember, I don't know if you would remember, but I remember a time when there were beepers, and there were codes that you would use to tell someone that you loved them on a beeper? Anybody know that? Anyway, it was like a 1, 2, 3, something or the other. Anyway, I remember a time when there was no Facebook. I am one of the last generations to know a world like that. I don't know much about technology. I know a lot of you do, so excuse me for not being as intelligent as all of you, but I do know things about people, about human interaction, and about communication. I lived in New York during a time when people needed to send text messages to their crushes or new boyfriends or that BFF, FF who messed up. And so you'd send those long text messages, you know, tirades. Anybody send long text messages that resemble novels, novellas? And then, you know, you want to change your phone, but you want to keep all the messages because that's the beginning of your relationship and remember when and all that stuff. But at that time, we had Nokia phones, and just to get to the letter C, you'd have to push a button 4 times, and then if you made a mistake, you'd have to delete everything, and it would take forever. Nevertheless, the invention of the text message, was something that really revolutionized the way that we communicated. It offered us a certain type of freedom. It eliminated a certain kind of risk. It was less intimate. And therefore, it was the preferred method of communication for those of us who were experiencing this new form of technology. At that time, you know, if one couldn't Google the news while they were bored, like if any of you are on your cell phones because you're not feeling whatever's happening on stage, you had to be present, even when something was boring, because you had nowhere to escape. And now, we can just pull something out of our pocket and escape into the Snapchats and the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the Reuters news, and it's a different time. People couldn't open up apps, you know. Now I have some friends in New York who have these, and I think maybe you have these apps. It's called Happen. Anybody heard of Happen? Yeah, are you on Happen? Monica Dogra is nearby, within 10 meters. Anyway, it's really amazing actually that you can open up this app and it tells you, it sends you a photo of who is close by and who is single, and then if, I think the girl has to accept the guy first, and then the guy can say yes, and then you know that someone's close. I mean, we're not looking up anymore to discover who's around us, we're looking here. There used to be a time when we'd have to take an active step in order to write the story of our day, as in physically take an active step to write the story of our day. There was a time when we needed to walk up to a stranger and actually speak to them in order to uncover their story. But those times are starting to change. Now, we can go to a site and I can search for a page, and that page represents an entire person. So we find that unidimensional page that represents an entire being: flesh, soul, beating heart, history, family, struggle, achievements, failures. And then I can place a judgment on that singular unidimensional page, and I can decide whether I like the person, whether I don't like the person, whether I approve of the way that they're living their life. And ultimately, though, I think we can all agree that that singular unidimensional page is an inaccurate description of the entire person that I'm sitting here judging as if I'm receiving the whole story. Correct? Incorrect? Correct? So what I'm about to say is, can you change to the next slide? I totally forgot. This is what the talk is about. Intimacy in the urban grid, where technology represents limitless options like Happen, like Tinder, like Grindr, like Facebook, like Google. In the guise of possibilities, every person is a limitless story, a limitless an infinite possibility, but belittles the core of the very nature of humans, that our nature is actually to truly connect, to grow, to build, to expand with one another. Can you take me to the next slide, please? So what's happening is, can you tell me what that says? That's right, this guy. Do you make music? Yes, I thought so. This shit is dangerous. So I say to myself, as well as you, and I'm telling myself this as well because everybody knows if you follow me on Snapchat or Instagram, I'm highly engaged in social media. Human beings are not unidimensional. We are four-dimensional, maybe even six-dimensional beings, depending on how far you are in your meditation practice or whatever. If you lined up all the people I've dated over the years, they all look different. They all come from different walks of life. They're all, you know, surprised. Why are you laughing? Huh? Anyway, oh, thanks. This is not your show. This is this show right now. And you're distracting me and making me shy. Okay. They all come from different walks of life. Like, occasionally they wear red suits, and occasionally... but they all helped me uncover mysteries, aspects of who I am that I would never have known before if I hadn't have been open to discovering them, and by virtue of discovering them, discovering an aspect of myself. Which brings me to one of my favorite New York City stories. Next slide, please. So my boyfriend had dumped me. Right, surprise, surprise. And I was down and out, so I decided to take myself out, as girls often do, or as people do. So I took myself out alone. I went to the nearest bar, and I sat down alone at the bar, and I just watched the beautiful bartender serving drinks while I served myself many drinks. And suddenly she noticed me. She was like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was like, I hope so. And I obviously, you know, did not look okay. And she laughed and she said, "You know what?" Next slide. "Hope is faith's crippled sister." And I, you know, those moments when you look at a perfect stranger in the eye and it's like laser beams entering into you. She was entering into me and telling me something I really needed to hear. If hope is faith's crippled sister, what does that mean? That means that hope is uncertain. Faith is certain. Faith knows that you'll be okay. And then she grabbed me by my collar and she whispered into my ear in this really loud bar. Next slide, please. "I think you really need to hear this," she said. "After a while, you learn the subtle difference between holding a hand and chaining a soul. And you learn that love doesn't mean leaning, and company doesn't always mean security. And you begin to learn that kisses aren't contracts and presents aren't promises. And you begin to accept your defeats with your head up and your eyes ahead, with the grace of a woman, not the grief of a child. And you learn to build your roads on today, because tomorrow's ground is too uncertain for plans. And futures have a way of falling down in mid-flight. After a while, you learn that even sunshine burns if you get too much. So you plant your own garden and you decorate your own soul instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers. And you learn that you really can endure, that you really are strong, that you really do have worth, and you learn and you learn and you learn. With every goodbye, you learn." I didn't write that. Veronica Schofstall wrote that, but it was said to me in the middle of the night while I was brokenhearted. And this tiny conversation at 3:30 a.m. when I was 21 became a moment that changed me forever. This stranger became a spark of light in an otherwise very dim tunnel that I was racing down. All because in that moment she was open, I was open. All because she had the courage to step over a social boundary and share with me heart to heart. Maybe this is one of the most magical aspects of human life, that we have intuition, that we can affect the emotional trajectory of someone else's life in just a fleeting moment of openness. This brings me to the next thing that I've been thinking about, what I mentioned earlier, dating apps, dating culture. To be honest, I've never actually been on one, and I felt pretty left out of the whole thing because it sounds really cool. I mean, just imagine, the entire single world is at the drop or at the push of a button. But over the past few years, I've started to pay attention. New York has changed. Even Bombay is changing. Even India has changed. Delhi is changing. The world is changing. If you go out to a bar, people are mostly now on their cell phones, or they're interacting with people that they already know. No one's going out to meet new people. That sense of discovery in the physical world, it's starting to dwindle. It's been replaced by a sense of discovery in the digital world, because the risk is far less and the options are far more, or so we think. I have so many crazy, beautiful, single friends, and most of them say that they'll remain single because the dating world is just so odd. It can be fun, and they definitely think that it's easy, but most of the time it lacks a certain kind of intimacy in the physical world. So could it be possible that much like the fast food movement and the fast fashion movement now being balanced by the slow organic food movement and people now buying vintage or investing in sustainable fashion, that it might be time for us to pay attention to the effects of the fast love movement? And perhaps we can respond to this realization with a meaningful and mindful relationship with digital love? Maybe? As most of you know, much of my work is online. I mentioned that earlier. I actually really love social media. I think it's granted me a lot of power, a lot of autonomy in my career. I can choose how I represent myself, but I work in an image-based industry, for better or worse, and digital representation is a big part of what I do. However, what goes online is actually not at all an accurate description of who I am entirely, what's happening in my day. Is your Facebook or your Instagram actually a legitimate representation of who you are? No. I mean, when was the last time that you decided to tweet, hey, I woke up with this zit? Or like, you know, your Facebook status was like, today, constipation, guys. That bhel puri, it was rough. You do that? No? Okay. I mean, I don't do that. I don't do that. But anyway. Some of you might be brave enough to share, like that guy is brave enough to share these sides of himself, but anyway, Snapchat. Some girls use the Snapchat filter all the time. It thins your face, it narrows your jawline, it widens your eyes, and it makes your skin look glorious. And they're like, that's me, that's not you. And I speak as someone who is regularly photoshopped, okay? I am regularly photoshopped. But I'm just saying that as someone who is photoshopped on the regular, I'm just saying it's important to create a separation in our minds about real life and digital life and the gray area that lies between. See what I did there? The gray area. I reached out for public funds a few years ago for one of my projects, and as a result, a hate article about me went viral, shared by many people I had known and loved over the years, people who had slept in my house, people I had made music with, people who I had toured with, people who I hug, people who I loved. Suddenly, I was confronted with this crazy thing where I was not a human being to people who knew me personally. So suddenly my digital self was being torn apart by millions of people in India, fueled by hundreds of people I considered friends, people who could have just picked up the phone and called me, people who could have just looked me in my eyes and spoken to me. So why was it safe to troll? Why was it suddenly okay to pass baseless judgment? Why was it safe to spread hate digitally? I'm just not about that life. So I decided that at this point in time, I would like look at some of you and place baseless judgment on you, like totally inappropriate, you know, based on nothing but superficial aspects of whatever I see, because that's what happens to me all the time. Like, you're tall, so you know you must get lots of ladies, which means that you're never actually gonna get married and you probably are not loyal. And you wear a red jacket and you talk whenever I'm on stage, so that means that you're attention hungry, which probably means that, I don't know, you're always just gonna be looking for attention, and not true. All of you who are clapping, you are heartless people. You are not very kind to one another. I've decided DTU is a very unkind environment. It's just silly. It's not real. It's not real. You know what? You're beautiful. Thank you for speaking up. You're a very handsome boy. I didn't acknowledge any women. You are lovely. All the women are also lovely. It's not, all I'm trying to get at is we're sitting here looking at unidimensional pages, passing entire judgments, swiping left, right, yes, no, I could date him, I couldn't date her, no thank you. What is happening? It's absurd. This talk is about how quick we are to do these things when human beings are energy and vibration. I'm telling you, if you haven't allowed yourself to feel attraction and lift off of someone who didn't fit into the rubric of what you think you like and what you think you want, then you truly have not lived. You truly have not. This talk is about the effects of what those rash decisions have on our lives and ways we can become more mindful about this beautiful gift of living during a technological renaissance. Androids have not taken over the planet yet. There is still time. This is the gray area where we can create change. Animators and scientists and the likes have yet to be able to completely digitize or roboticize, it's okay, I don't need it, roboticize human beings, because human beings are actually too complex. Have you ever seen an animation of a human? Instantly we know it isn't real, because we've been studying one another's faces out of our mother's wombs. The second we see an android, a robot, a digitized human, anybody saw Star Wars? That bit really bothered me. It really bothered me. He really didn't look real, you know? Because that's what it is. Human nature is fluid. We diversify, we're ever changing, we're unpredictable. We have to be experienced moment to moment, and suddenly we're something new. The human spirit cannot be replicated. We are too nuanced. We are infinite. So I invite you just to consider the infinite possibilities of every being around you. I invite you to remember the infinite you beyond digital spheres. I'm going to attempt at practicing this myself. Because even if you experience rejection, even if things fall apart, even if a person lets you down, it is through living you learn. It is through experience that you learn, that you really can endure, that you really are strong, that you really do have worth, and you learn, and you learn, and you learn. With every goodbye, you learn. Thank you.